In this video, I'm going to walk you through Chapter 12 and parts of Chapter 13 in the text, talking about linking up PHP and MySQL to create a database-driven website. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so in a previous video and with documentation, I showed you how to configure PHPMyAdmin and then also to build user and databases and then the table that you'll be using for your assignment. But in this video, I want to go ahead and add a new user, a new database, and a new table specifically for the walkthrough of Chapter 12. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I did is I went to localhost /php myadmin. That brings up the PHP myadmin interface here. Then I click on users. Then I'm going to click to add a user. My username, I'm going to call this one quotes. The host is local. The password, I'm just going to type in password. Again, in the real world, we would have something a lot more secure, but for our purposes here, it's not a big deal. In my database for user, I'm going to create a database with the same name and grant all privileges. And then I'm going to click Add User. Then I'm going to select the quotes database, and I'm going to create a table. There we go. I'm going to create a table, and the name of it, I'm going to call it quotes, and it should have 4 columns. Click Go. My first column is ID. My second column is author. My third column is quote. And my final column is date entered. Okay. For ID, my type is int. My attributes are unsigned. My index is primary. And finally, under AI, I check to make sure it's auto-incremented. That's pretty much the same as your assignment and what I had you walk through in the documentation. So, all right, for my author, it's a varchar of 100. For my quote, it's text, and for date entered, it's date time. We want to go ahead and put an index for the author. And I'm pretty sure that's right. Let's change this ID to quote ID. Otherwise, you're fine. Go ahead and click Save, and that will create the quotes table. So we have our database set up now. Now what we need to do is start connecting to it. So if you look at the beginning of Chapter 12, you have several different steps here. Up until about page 342, 343, most of that is talking about some of the MySQL handling and all that. It's important to go ahead and read that, but we're going to actually go into the process of connecting to and selecting databases. And you can create databases and tables and all that with PHP, but for the time constraints in this course and kind of what we want to cover with the fundamentals of PHP, didn't really have time to get into a lot of that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to skip ahead and just start looking at connecting to two databases here. Okay. All right, so the first thing that I need to do is I need to go create a new project. And I'm going to just call this one week 8. I'm going to create a folder called includes. And inside this folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one MySQL Connect. And the simplest way to connect to a database is just to do this. Let me grab the page 2 in your text. There are several different pages, but one that shows you a really good example is on page, it's on chapter 13. It's on page 382. And all we're doing here is this. We're typing in a variable called dbc, and we're giving it the value from a built-in function called MySQL Connect. And then the arguments that go in here are the host. In this case, it's localhost. The username, which I believe I called that quotes, and then the password, which is just password. So this is actually connecting to the database, connecting to the server. And then the next thing we need to do is select the database. And that one's another built-in function called MySQL Select DB. The name of the database is quotes. Now I'm going to run back real quick to my PHPMyAdmin. I left that up and running, and indeed there is a quotes database and a quotes table, and the user is quotes and the password is password, so I know that's right. Alright, so that's probably the easiest way to do this. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a form that just basically takes a few different fields. And if you have your Week 8 assignment files, you can actually pretty much just copy the form. Let me pull that up real quick. You can pretty much just open the form from your Week 8 solutions, or your Week 8 assignment. Let me log in here. Yeah, well, you can kind of do that, I guess. Let me view my page source. I'm going to copy out this code here. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to build a form real quick. I'm going to go to my index page, and I'm just going to print out a form. I'm going to grab a couple of things here. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to build it from scratch. So, I'm going to print out a form. I'm going to send the form, after it's clicked, to a file that we're going to build here in a second called addQuote.php, and my method is post. Okay. There are a couple different methods you're going to use here. You're going to use post to add your quote, and then we're going to use the get method to delete it. Now we could update a quote and all that, but I'm not going to actually show you that because it's kind of out of the scope of the course a little bit at this point. Okay. Now if I look at page 354, you'll see there's the script 12.5 down here at the bottom. There's actually a good form that you can pretty much just copy this right out of the text. So I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say author, and my input type is name. My name is, or I'm sorry, input type is text. Jesus. My name is author, and I'm just going to say that my size is 40, just in case they have a long name. Okay. I'll just make sure that the input tag is self-closing. Okay, and then I'll next line down, I'll just put in a text area. And I'm just going to do 5 rows and 40 columns. My name here is quote, and calls is 40. Rows is 5. That gives me plenty of room. Now, one of the things that you'll probably want to do up here too, inside your author, is say that the max size here is 100 characters. So that way I don't have any issues when I go in to create my posting. Or go to update the database, it doesn't cut off if the author's name is more than 100 characters. It's pretty important because they're going to index based on that size as well. Okay. And then we just have a submit button. We got a self-text area, it's not a self-closing tag. Alright, and then finally we'll just have a submit button that just says submit, or post this entry or something. I'll just say add quote. There, that'll work. Alright, so let's go take a look at our index page, make sure our form is the way that we want it to be. I'm going to format that as well. Okay. Alright, so I can just say something like, Todd Jameson, and I'll just say this is a sample quote. Okay, it's not going to do anything right now. Click add quote, and it should tell me that the add quote file is not found, which is fine. It's not found because it doesn't exist yet. Alright, let's go create a new file. And I'm going to call this one add quote. What this file is going to do is actually add our quote. Okay. Now, if I'm looking at chapter 12, I'm going to look at this section here on inserting data into a database. It starts at page 352. What we want to do here is go ahead and prepare the database for adding information. There are a few different things that we need to do here. What we need to do first is we need to make sure that the server request method is post, and if it is, we're going to handle that form that was submitted to us. So we're just going to do a if conditional. And I'm going to learn how to type someday. if the server request method is post, what we're going to do is we're going to add the entry. Okay, else what we're going to do is let's see, how do I want to handle this? Just look at how your text does it. It's not okay. Let me back up here a little bit. This is not the way that I like to do it, but let's take a look at your all right. Let's do this. Let's go and exit out of this add quote. Okay. I'm going to discard any of my changes. I'm going to do it the way that your text does it so I don't confuse you guys. And then I'm going to delete add quote. And then I'm going to rename this index.php to add quote. I'll have to close out of it first. Okay. So with our add quote, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say this. If the server request method is post, then we're going to handle the form. Okay? Else, we're going to print the form. Format this a little bit. Okay. Okay. So, if our request method is post, and we want to handle the form, very first thing we need to do is we need to connect and select. So, here's how you do it. Okay. We're just going to type in include, open parent, and the location of the file that connects and selects our database. Now, on page 353, if you're kind of looking at what they're doing, they actually have it built in manually to connect and select to the database, but I don't like that because what'll happen is that if you have a change in your password, change in the database, tables, whatever, then you have to go through and change that in every single file you're working in. If I just include a file like I did with this includes, then I only have to do it once. If I have to make any changes to any of the database information, it's done very quickly, and I don't have to worry about changing it in multiple files. So do that one my way. Okay. What we need to do here is start validating the form data. So we always do a success check. We've been doing it forever. Continue to do it. We're going to say that our problem is false. Okay, this is good. This is what we want. So we're going to say this. If we're not empty on the author and the title, okay? So author and we're not empty on the quote. Alright, so if we're not empty on the author or the quote, in other words, both of them are there, then what we're going to do is this. Looking at page 354, we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to strip out any of our tags. In other words, if it's just a quote and it's just a title, or I'm sorry, an author and a quote, we shouldn't have any HTML in there at all. Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to say that our author is, we're going to trim any excess space. Okay, we're going to say strip tags, and then finally it's post author. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for quote, but just change from author to quote. So I have to type in all my code again. Just good. Don't want to do that. Alright, so we have our quote, we have our author. These are the only two things that we actually need to collect from the form here. Okay. The rest of the stuff that we'll send in for the date entered and the ID, those are pretty much done automatically. Alright, so if either of if my author is empty or my quote is empty, then I want to just go ahead and bark at the person here and just say something like this. Okay. First, I want to make sure that my problem is true, because there's a problem. You can do that before or after you print, it doesn't matter. Okay, and I'm just going to print something like this. I'm just going to tell them that they need to submit both an author and an entry. Okay. Let me get that down, the next line down. Okay. Alright. And if there's no problem, then what we're going to do now is we're going to build our query, and then we're going to run it and insert the author and the quote into the database. So the first thing we need to do is define the query. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. It's pretty much the same thing that you have in your text, and it's pretty much also the same thing you're going to put in your assignment, and that is this. Our query is, dang it. And you want to use double quotes here because you're going to have some variables, and you can do it with single quotes, but double quotes is easier to read. So I'm going to say insert into quotes, which is the name of the table, my quote ID. Let me go back to my PHPMyAdmin here and make sure that my fields are right. Yep, okay. So my quote ID, my author, my quote, and my date. Date entered. And then my values are 0. In other words, it's auto incrementing, so just put in 0. My author, my quote, and then finally now, which is a built-in function in MySQL. And what that will do is that'll automatically give it the date and put the date entered in a date time stamp format. Alright, so I've built my query, and now what I need to do is execute the query. So what I've done is I've built this MySQL query, which you don't need to know all of it right now because it's such a basic course, and you'll take courses later on where you'll really start getting into how SQL works. At this point, we're just saying I'm taking this information that I gained from the from the form, and I'm just sticking it into the database. Okay, so when I execute my query, this is what you do. You're saying if your MySQL query, and then DBC. So if it runs, or if it's good, then we're just going to print out blog has been added. Or I'm sorry, quote has been added. Blogs, quotes, too many things. Else, I'm going to print out another error message and just say that I couldn't add the entry. I'm just going to copy this error message from before, paste it. And for my description, I'm just going to say could not add the quote because colon, give myself a line break, and then on the next line down I'm going to print out the error message. And this is what you say: MySQL error, whatever we're getting back from the database connection, and then next line down we're just going to say the query being run was, give ourselves another line break, or you don't have to actually, they don't in this example. I'm going to say my query being run was this. And then we're just going to take the value of the query, okay, from up here. There we go. All right. And that looks like that's about it. Okay. Now, so if there were no problems, then the very last thing we need to do is close out the database here. And that's just called MySQL close, and then the argument that we give is DBC. Now, with PHP, it's going to close your SQL connection anyways, but at the end of running the script, but we want to go ahead and close this out. All right, so we're just going to say close the connection. All right. I think. All right, let's see. Yeah. So let's go ahead and run this add quote. See if we have a typo here. So go back to 9 line. Alright, so I'm going to say that my author, I'm going to put unknown, and the quote is, "This is a test quote." I'm going to click add quote, and let's see what I have here. Use of an undefined constant promise and problem. And 134 just had a typo. I was checking for problems there. Alright, let's refresh. Okay, so it says my quote has been added. Now let's go back to my SQL, PHP here, and let's go take a look at my quotes table. And I should have an entry, and I do. Quote ID of 1, author unknown, quote, this is a test quote, and the date entered. Okay, so those are all populated. Now let's go ahead and do one more. So I'm going to click my back button. I'm going to say the same thing with the author of unknown, and I'm going to just type in quote number 2 and click add quote. Okay, it tells me that my quote has been added. I'm going to go back to PHP and I'm going to click refresh. Okay, I have another quote there, so I know this works. Okay, good. So I want at least 2 quotes in there because I'm going to show them next using a while loop. And then I'm going to, in the third script, I'm going to delete the quote. Alright, so let's go with a new one. New PHP web page, and I'm going to call this one list quote. I believe that's what they have here. They call theirs view entry, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say view quotes. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and copy the no, I'm not going to copy that. I'm going to go from the beginning here. Alright, so I'm going to name this page. I'm going to sell it just view quotes. Okay. Here's what we need to do. If I want to view my quotes, it's pretty easy to do. All that I really need to do is first connect to and select DB. And I'm going to go back to my add quote here, and I'm going to copy some code. The first couple lines here after the server request method is post, I'm using connect and select DB. Copy this code here that has the include. Okay. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead and define my query. To select all entries, or select all quotes. This is if you want to select all of them, which is the easiest in this case. Okay, so my query is this. It's pretty simple. It's just select star from quotes, and then I want to order by my date entered. And I want to just make them in descending order. So my newest quote shows up first, and then my oldest quote shows up last. Okay. You don't have to do it this way. You can do it in whatever order you want, but something like blog entries and all that, or let's say you have like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you want your oldest stuff to show at the bottom, your newest stuff to show at the top. So that's kind of what we're doing here. Although with a list of quotes, it really doesn't matter. Or if anything, you would maybe even just order them by the author or whatever. But we're going to order from the latest quote put in first to the oldest quote put in last, in this case. Okay, so here's the deal. If that query looks good, we're going to go ahead and run it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my add quote here, and I am going to execute my query. So let's see. couple things that I need to do. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to go back to that. I'm going to write it from scratch because there are some slight differences. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say if R for result here, creating a new variable, equals MySQL fetch array. In other words, what I'm doing here is I'm pulling up, I'm taking everything that I just selected from that query and I'm sticking it into an array. Whatever the result is here. Okay? And this is on page 363. And in a more advanced course, we do more with this array, but here we're just gonna print out a bunch of the elements from it. I'm going to retrieve and I'm going to print every record. The easiest way to do this is to use what's called a while loop. So I'm going to say while my row is MySQL fetch array for the results. I'm going to print a couple things. I'm going to print a paragraph. I'm going to give it an H3 size heading for the top thing here. The top, and the H3 size heading would be the author. Okay? So I'm going to say this row. This is how you print out an array entry. Author, and again, this is just right here on page 363. Okay. On the next line down, I'm going to print the entry, so the quote here. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my code I just created, a little shortcut. And then I'm going to print out a link to delete the entry. Okay. And remember that I'm putting a quote within a quote here for two double quotes, so I need to do a backslash in front of the double quote. In other words, if I don't, it won't render properly. Okay. href, and then I'm going to call this one delete quote .php, and I'm using the get method, so I'm going to put a comma. No, I'm sorry, a question mark. having that kind of day today. All right, and then an ID, or yeah, ID equals, and then my quote ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this row here for a quote, I'm going to shove it in and just change from quote to quote ID. Okay. And I think and then finish out the link, and that should do it. Alright. And then finally, we're just going to do a there, I thought that looked a little weird. Okay. And then we're going to do a horizontal line, and then finally close out the paragraph. Okay, so that should do it if MySQL fetch array while row. And let's go ahead and test this now to make sure that it works, and it should at this point. Let's see, view quotes .php. Find variable r, line 23. Oh, yeah, dummy. All right. So on line 23, I accidentally put in MySQL fetch array. What I meant to put in was MySQL query. Yeah, that was kind of dumb. All right. Find variable r. Huh. Yeah, I made a mistake up here. For on line 23, initially where it said if r equals MySQL fetch array r, I just missed a step there. It's r. It should be MySQL query and then query in DBC, and you'll see that on line 23 on page 363 as well. I just had to correct that real quick. Let's see. Or line 20 on page 363. Okay, so what I should see here once I run this script is, let's refresh this. It should show the author and then their quote. Okay. You can flip that around if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Here we just want to kind of test and see. Maybe it's more important to have the quote on the top and then the author on the bottom, but really for this particular walkthrough, I don't really care what you do. Okay, so we know that this MySQL fetch array works, but what if it doesn't? Then what we need to do is this. We need to just print out our an error message, basically, that just states that you couldn't read the quote. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this add quote PHP file, and I'm going to copy the code that I made for the error message. And I'll just say this. Could not retrieve the data because, oops, there we go, of whatever the issue was. And then to test this, why are you doing that? Okay, clean this up a little bit. Alright, so if I can't pull back this query, then I'm going to just print out I couldn't retrieve the data because, and then whatever the error was. Okay, so in order to test this, first I'm going to run my script again, just to make sure that, because I know that it's working properly, okay, showing the two quotes. Now I'm going to take where it says select star from quotes up here in the query, and instead of select, I'm going to delete the S. Okay. Now I know this won't work because this query will not run because it's not set up properly. It needs the select. Elect is not a valid command in MySQL. I'm going to save my file. I'm going to run it again. Okay, and it should say that you have an error message in your SQL syntax. Okay. That's how you test to make sure that your errors are working properly. Alright, now down at the very bottom here, when we're all done with this file, we're just going to do a close here. So it's MySQL close DBC. A little bit of cleanup. And that's it. So that's how you view your quotes here. The last thing I need to do in this video is to create the delete command, or the delete script here. And that one's pretty easy. That is on, starts on about page 367. Alright, so all we need to do here is delete an entry. Most of the time in this class you've been using the get method, or the post method, sorry, to process your scripts. In this one we're going to use the get method. Pretty much the same syntax, we just change post to get and do a couple of other minor things. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one delete quote, which in my view quotes script I actually believe that's called, yes, delete quote.php. Okay, good. Alright, so to delete a quote, here's what we need to do. We need to create a connection to the database as long as the server request method is get. Okay. So here's the easiest way to do it. First thing I want to do is go ahead and connect and select to the database so I can open up any of the other files that I've used and copy my code that connects to the database here. Okay. Two things that I need to set for, or look for. One, I need to see if that quote ID is set, and if it is it numeric? Okay. Because if it isn't either of those, then I really can't delete it. So I'm going to say if is set get, and then it would be, what am I looking for here in this view quotes? If the ID, get ID is set, okay, and is numeric, okay. If those two are set, then I can do this. What am I missing here? There we go. Alright, so if my ID is set, so if there was something that was sent from the script and it's numeric, then I can go ahead and delete it. Okay. So I'm going to define my query real quick here. Here's the thing about when you're deleting a record from the database. You only delete what you need to delete. So let's say we have a record that we want to delete, this quote, and we only delete one at a time. Okay. Unless you have some other reason to do so. You want to keep your transactions to a minimum, make sure you're only deleting what you want to delete. That's just kind of security 101. Okay, so my query is this. Now, what I'm going to do is, your text asks you if you actually want to delete your post or your quote. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to set up a query that just deletes the stupid thing. Now, we could get into all the different pieces of confirmation and all that, which are good, but they're more for more of an advanced course. Right now, we're pretty much out of time to do a lot of fancy stuff, so I'm just going to show you how to delete it manually. So my query is this. It is delete from quotes where my quote ID what did I set that to? Is get ID. And then I want to make sure that I put limit 1 on the end of it. Okay? typo here and I don't see it. Okay, the typo that I had here is they just had an extra bracket. I didn't see that, so block that out. All right, so I have my query set up, and then I need to run my query, and then I need to kind of report on the result here. Now, the thing is, since I've limited this to one record being deleted, then it should only delete this ID that was sent from view quotes here. So there I've defined my query. Now I'm going to execute it. I'm going to set up a new variable called R. R is for result. And then it's built-in function called MySQL query. And that query is query, and then it's specifically for this database connection. Okay. All right. Now, if that runs, then I'm going to report on my result. This is important to let somebody know that their entry is deleted. Now, on our assignment, I've actually kind of pulled that step out because I just sent it right back to the main page. I guess it's a little cleaner. It's not perfect, but it was a little easier that way. All right, so I'm going to report on the results, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say this: if MySQL rows affected, or MySQL affected rows is the name of the function, is 1. This is on page 368. My database connection is 1. And then I'm just going to print out that your blog entry has been deleted, or quote. Okay. Else, I'm going to print out an error message. And I'm going to go back to view quotes here, and I'm going to say that I'm looking for the error message that I created earlier. I'm going to pull this out and paste it and just change a couple of quick things. Okay. And I'm going to say could not delete the quote because, and then whatever the query was. Okay. If we had more time, we would actually create functions that did a lot of this stuff for us, but kind of have to pick and choose what we're going to cover, and didn't quite make that. All right. Now, one of the things that I want to look at too is this. If somebody accessed the page in error and they didn't submit anything, in other words, if the ID in the isn't set and it's not numeric, here at the very end, I want to just put in this. I'm going to say else no ID was received. Okay. I'm just going to print something like this. This page has been accessed in error. Okay. That's pretty much it. And at the very end, we're just going to close the connection. That's it. Pretty straightforward. Alright, now let's go ahead and run delete quote by itself first. And what you should see is error messages says this page has been accessed in error. That's because there was no ID and it wasn't set. Let's go back to view quotes. I have 2 quotes here. I'm going to delete quote number 2 here at the top. Click the delete button, And I should get a thing back here where it says that the quote has been deleted, a message. Now I'm going to go back to my PHPMyAdmin. I've had this open the entire time. I'm going to click refresh, and I should only see, let's see here, should only see one quote. Okay. I'm going to go and I'm going to add a quote, and I'm going to call this quote 3. Click add a quote, and then I'm going to go back and to the root here and look view quotes, and it's showing 2 quotes. I have the very first one and the third one. I'm going to go ahead and delete the first one. Okay, and again, I'm just going through and I'm looking to make sure that things work. If I click back on view quotes and I click refresh, should only see this third quote. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. Okay, and then I'm going to go back, I'm going to hit refresh, and you'll see that there aren't any quotes now. I'll go back to add quote, and I'm going to add one called quote 4. And go to view quotes, and it should work. Alright, so that's pretty much chapter 12 and 13 in a nutshell. Again, your assignment will go into a little more detail on how to do this, and I'll also have I'm going to go ahead and after this video is done here, I'm going to go ahead and create another video that'll actually walk you through some of the steps on the assignment too. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll get right back to you. Thanks.